We're broadcasting. We're broadcasting. Good morning. Members, we're online here. You're very welcome. The committee is being broadcast online throughout Parliament buildings. You're welcome to use your mobile devices so long as they're in airplane mode and are muted. I want to introduce Caroline Perry, who will be clerking the meeting today in Nick's absence. You're very welcome, Caroline. I want to advise members that the meeting will move into closed session at the end to continue informal deliberations on the Climate Change No.1 Bill. We also will be breaking at 10:45 to go out and visit the carbon battle bus, which is outside. First item on the agenda is apologies. I don't have any apologies. Second item is chairperson's business. There's a memo from the clerk, proposals for oral evidence sessions on Climate Change No.2 Bill. Members, the clerk has provided a memo at page 5 of the pack outlining proposals for a series of sessions with stakeholders to give oral evidence on the Climate Change No.2 Bill that was passed at second stage on the 27th of September. As discussed at the meeting on the 9th of September, it has been agreed to invite multiple stakeholders to each event to hear collective views. The full details of the proposed format of these sessions and a timetable is set out in the pack. The 4 planned sessions are as follows. Thursday the 14th of October from 1:30 to 3 o'clock with representatives from the agri-food sector. Thursday 21st of October from 1:30 to 3 o'clock with representatives from the environmental sector. Thursday 4th of November 12 to 1 with academics and policy groups. Thursday 11th of November from 12 to 1 with other stakeholders. The memo also provides a list of questions that members may wish to consider during the sessions. And I want to ask members to confirm, with Caroline or Nick, their availability for these sessions and hold the times in their diaries. And if any additional organisations may wish to hear from, please advise the clerk. I held a meeting with the US Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agriculture Service on the 20th of September. We discussed items such as climate change, cap reform, EU farm to fork, veterinary trade, and we will circulate a note of that in due course. Hang on a second here.